building a business, you get very stressed and you stay stressed, if that makes sense. With climbing and things, it's an instant stress. There's a moment where you're going to shit yourself.
Yep.
You know, if you've climbed seriously, you'll have several moments in your life where you think, I am going to die now. There's a good chance I'm going to die if I don't get this right. And I can think of probably 3 or 4 moments in my life where I thought, I'm really in deep poo here, right? And I've got to get myself out of this. And then it's a mental game, and it's not like sport in the fact that you're competing with somebody else. You're competing with yourself. And I love that. I love that, competing with myself and challenging myself and pushing myself to those limits. And I think that's why I like the outdoor world. And climbing presents that. You've got something to think, I want to get to the top of that.
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. The Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by Sig Sauer. SIG is a leading provider and manufacturer of firearms, electro-optics, ammunition, air guns, and suppressors. For over 250 years, Sig Sauer Inc. has evolved and thrived by blending American ingenuity, German engineering, and Swiss precision. Today, Sig Sauer is synonymous with industry-leading quality and innovation, which has made it the brand of choice amongst the U.S. military, the global defense community, law enforcement, competitive shooters, hunters, and responsible citizens. Sig Sauer is also a premier provider of elite firearms instruction and tactical training at the Sig Sauer Academy located in New Hampshire. For more information about Sig Sauer and its complete line of products, visit sigsauer.com. Where were you born?
I was born in Sussex in the UK, in a town called Crawley, which is the arsehole of the earth. And I don't go back, I can tell you. It's if you wanted me to pick somewhere to be born, that would be the last place on the planet.
Maybe not the last place on the planet, but
no.
So what is Sussex all about, and where is that in England?
So Sussex is in the south. It's in the southeast, just south of London. It's actually the most wooded county in the UK.
Okay.
So it's still got a lot of woodland and fauna out there, but we are in a very populated part of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've also got Ashdown Forest there, which is great if you're into your history, because Ashdown Forest was basically one of Henry VIII's hunting grounds.
Okay.
And there's a lot of little villages around it called Hatches, Coleman Hatch, Wood Hatch, Nut Hatch, and they're the old gateways into that hunting ground.
Really?
So there's a 27-mile, you can still see it in places now, 27-mile ditch dug all the way round with a pale fence so all the animals could jump in, and they were just waiting in there for dear old Henry and his friends to go and hunt them.
And would that have been fox, stag?
It would have been boar.
Boar?
Yeah, boar would have been a big thing. Stags, very much so. There was even grouse and all sorts of things that we've lost now in the UK. Yeah.
When did the UK get pheasants?
The pheasants were brought in. That's a very good question. I don't rightly know, but I'm going to take a wild stab, and it's probably not too far out of it, because obviously when the Victorians started making lots of money through the wool mills and all the things that were going on, and they discovered Scotland, right?
Yeah.
They went up and built their glorious mansions up there, and the whole gist was you took a train up there, you invited your friends and family, and you'd stay up there for the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the pheasants were brought in around the same time, maybe a bit earlier.
Okay,
yeah.
So they were probably brought in for hunting.
Oh, 100%.
Sport.
Yeah, yeah.
So Oregon is the first state in the United States that got pheasants.
Right.
And they were brought in by Chinese railroad workers.
Food.
I think so.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're such a beautiful animal.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that could easily have been something that could have been spiritual. It could have been ornamental. I don't know. They don't travel all that well.
No.
So they would have been coming over under, the same conditions as the rail workers, which was not great. It's remarkable that they made it here, but, now we have pheasants all over the place, and they started out here in Oregon.
So we get a melanistic pheasant.
Yeah.
And they like them in the UK because they fly very well. I think they're a little bit lighter in the body. I'm not a pheasant expert, but they look lighter in the body. And they are, would they be from Minnesota or something?
There is, and I've ordered them here too, because I have these things called surrogators, which they're pretty cool. I was trying to get a game bird population established here, and there's these 2 big metal boxes, and you can put about 100 pounds of feed in there. There's a 30-gallon water tank that goes in, and then you attach a big propane tank, and it heats, feeds, and waters chicks from their first day until their 30th day, and then you open the doors and they fly away without being very habituated to people. And then they tend to home back to that area, and you can leave the gate open so that they can have a safe place to hide from predators at night a little bit. And, I gave that a try for a while, and I wasn't sure how far the birds were going after they grew up. There's other pheasants around. So one year I got melanistic mutants, and it was from a hatchery that I think was in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And they're basically, the ones that I had were just a pheasant, but they were black, and they were shiny and iridescent and really beautiful. I found one of my melanistic pheasants about 40 miles away.
Right.
That year. So they were dispersing over a huge area, and our raptor population here, the avian predators, it's just incredible. We have the second highest density of raptors of anywhere in the country.
I've seen a lot on fence posts today.
Totally.
It's crazy.
It's a bad place to be a pheasant.
Yeah. And have you got red tails here in Harris?
We do. We have red tails, we have Harris, we have sharp shins, we have ferruginous hawks, we have northern harriers, we have bald and golden eagles. We've got it all.
You wouldn't want to be a pheasant then.
It's a bad place to be a pheasant.
Yeah.
And agronomy has changed too. So these farmers have gotten better at using the edges of their field for crop production. And those edges, or maybe hedgerow, you might call them, that was the best habitat for these game birds. And as GPS technology came along and they're able to steer these combines and tractors better and better, they moved into that edge habitat, and we've lost, a huge amount of places for those birds to live.
It's absolutely fascinating you say that, James, because we're going the other way now. Right.
Oh, you are?
So what's happened in the UK, we've really stuffed our grey partridge population, which is the native partridge. I'm not a big bird shooter, so forgive me if I get this wrong, but we have 2 types of partridge in the UK, the redlegs, which are French, and then the greys. The redlegs do pretty wonderfully well, but they will move all over the place. They're much more sort of fluid than the pheasants are. The pheasants tend to hang around a bit better. But with the grey legs, because our hedgerows have gone, that's where they used to nest and rear their young.
Yeah.
It's stuffed the population. So what they're doing now in the UK is they're actually making those, they're paying the farmers to leave some set aside around the edges. And it's been wonderful. And I'm really into my raptors. So Magali, my partner, keeps a little owl. And they're not they weren't native to the UK. They came over probably a couple of hundred years ago. Well, they were native 6,000 years ago, and then they died out for some reason, and now they're back again. So she's got a little owl that we rescued. But
what's his name?
Oscar.
Oscar.
The funny thing is about Oscar, Oscar's a female.
Okay.
We had 2 little owls, and I said, I'm sure that's... and it's because obviously raptors, the females are bigger, aren't they?
Yeah.
This is a tiny little owl, and I found it on the side of the road one night, and the parents had pushed it out, and I don't know, I'd had a glass of wine, and I thought, I'm going to walk out and just see if it's... And it was, sure enough, it's back in it. And I thought, no, I'm going to put this in a box. And I took it back, and in the morning, Magali rescued it, and it was tiny. I mean, it was...
Sure.
And she's... that's her pet. Yeah.
That's
and
great.
It's a moody little sulky bird, as little owls can be, but she gets a lot of fun out of it. And, it's a brilliant little bird. But I used to release barn owls.
Okay.
So, because their population just plummeted, and it does follow the vole population in the UK.
Sure.
So it's like any of these predators. If the food source goes, they soon starve out.
Especially on an island.
Exactly. So, and barn owls aren't waterproof. They're very quiet they need to be quiet, so they pay the price. So obviously, if it's raining or whatever, and for a long period of time, they can starve out with those as well. But anyway, those populations have done very well since they've started putting this set-aside back in again. To see a lot more barn owls about, which is great.
Cool.
Yeah, so we're getting some things right in the UK. We're getting a lot of things very badly wrong, I'm sorry to say, but some things are working.
Do you still live in Sussex?
I still live in Sussex. I don't spend a lot of time there, James. It's not my... I'm a sort of... the older I get, I just like a bit of solo time.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm very much an outdoorsy person. I've always been an outdoorsy person. It doesn't matter whether I've got a rifle, fly rod, climbing gear. I'm too old for the climbing now anyway. But that's just I just need to be outside. And Sussex... I do a lot of hunting in Sussex. It's great for deer management and things. We get lots of opportunities, and I work with a wonderful bunch of deer hunters over there, very good at what they do. But I spend a lot of time up in Scotland. And this COVID, if I learned anything, I've been making gear for fishing stuff as well. I've been working on some fishing stuff and just spending as much time as I can up in Scotland because it's just a bit more remote. And that northwest area of Scotland, a bit like your northwest area here, on a minuscule rate, obviously, is just a beautiful place to be. The one challenge is the midges. If your followers don't know them, they're little tiny, like a black fly or no-see-em, you might call them, and those things just take chunks out of you.
Biting bastards.
It's
horrible. Just unnecessary.
Yeah.
And why does it have to itch afterwards? I would donate a gallon of blood at the beginning of the year if I didn't have to itch all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time up there, and I bought a little roof tent from a Land Rover. Literally, you'd get outside the car, and within 3 minutes, you thought, I've got to get in the tent. And then I was looking at this tent was new, and I thought those holes, the mosquito net looked pretty big.
Yeah.
I thought, oh God, they're going to kill me. Luckily, not many got in, but torture.
Yeah.
Torture.
No, that's no fun. I watched some of these shows like Naked and Afraid, and we had Laura Zira on here, several episodes ago. I can't remember. It was this summer. And Laura's been on that show 4 or 5 times. And dude, she just got lit up by bugs.
Yeah.
Without a stitch of fabric to protect her for 3 weeks. That would break me.
I think it'd break me too. I think I don't know how people cope. The fascinating thing, if you look at the history in the UK when the Romans were there, and I mean they would have been tough people, living on a pretty sort of sparse existence, and they used to say about the Scots north of the wall that we had 2 walls in Scotland where you can still see the remnants of them, but north of Hadrian's, I can't remember if it was that one or the next wall further north, but they said the Scots would run around not a stitch of clothes on in all weathers. And I thought, well, one thing, the rain and everything is pretty rough up there, but the midges, how did they cope? Yeah. I just don't think we're as tough as they were then.
Well, they came up with some pretty good whiskey. That might have been part of it.
Probably. And covered themselves with peat, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brutal. Now, you were telling me earlier that some of the game species in Britain that are arguably native may have actually been brought by the Romans.
Indeed. So we've got a wonderful deer species, fallow deer, prevalent throughout Europe. I think you might have some fallow over here in Texas and places.
Texas has everything, yeah.
So it's a good venison to eat.
Yep.
I don't like it during the rut. The males get real skanky and just properly jizzed up. You can smell them, and they're...
None of these animals taste good during the rut.
No.
And elk hunters are out of their minds, especially the guys who have only ever archery elk hunted.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I love the taste of bull elk.
Yeah.
Like, well, you should try an elk that is not in the rut because it's way better.
Yeah,
if you can stomach this stuff, you should try one in, early August or, a cow in October.
Oh,
that's
fantastic.
pretty good.
Yeah. So the fallow, they were either brought in by the Romans or the Normans.
Okay.
But we think, I believe it was the Romans that brought them over. Excellent food source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's smart.
Yeah. So with 6 species of deer in the UK, you've got the muntjac, little Asian deer.
It has fangs.
It has little tusks, and when you touch the tusks, they move around. There's a lot of movement in them. They're very flexible. And they've got very thick fur around their necks because they obviously fight each other. And unlike any other deer, they don't have a season. The females are normally pregnant within 3 days of giving birth.
Wow.
So they can
populate really quickly.
And they're a problem. Because they'll eat a lot of their native. They love bluebells. They love a lot of the plants that, might struggle. Luckily for me, they're very good eating. Wonderful food to eat.
That's awesome.
And the continentals love to come and hunt them. And they're quite a challenge to hunt because they never stop. They're constantly on the move. So you've got to be quite quick on them. And I will hunt them on a 2-leg system because it's fast and mobile. But you might see 4 or 5 and you'd be lucky to get one. Because unless you're really good at it.
They just never
probably
stop.
Need your little AR. We'd do better then. Yeah, and they're dinky. They're tiny little deer. So we've got those. And then the next one up, which is my favourite species, is the roe. Beautiful deer, about Labrador size, I guess.
Yep.
Great eating. Quite a solo animal. You might see them sort of 3, 4s and 2s, but they'll often be solitary. And I love them because you can go and hunt them in the summer. Pair of shorts, nice evening job, really, really wonderful deer stalking in nice terrain. And then you've got the fallow that we were talking about that were brought in with the Romans. You've got Sika, Manchurian and Japanese. Great, best venison by a country mile, I'd say, out of all the venison that I've eaten. And then we've got the red deer. Yeah.
And the red deer have a really interesting history. There are log books in some of these Scottish castles that go back to, the year 1100 for red deer management.
Yeah.
And actually a lot of what I do with elk management here and the research that I base some of that off of is off of some of that ancient stag literature because it's such a larger quorum of data.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to see the similarities and the differences, but there's more similarities than differences between the red deer and the wapiti.
And you wouldn't have had anything causing an adultery to that either, would you? For that information would have been really raw and fresh because it would have they'd have managed them. There would have been predators back then in the 11th century, so it would have fitted very well to play with what you've got here. The interesting thing I find about the red deer is you'll take... we were talking about the bears and thinking possibly are those black bears a different gene pool, which I don't know anything about bears, but
they've got to be.
They've got to be, I would say. I would love them to be as well because I think that's quite an exciting thing. But with the red deer that we've got in the UK, you can take the same genetic species. The red deer up in Scotland, pretty tiny. Yeah. 150 pounds. Same deer down in the West Country, easily 2 times the weight.
Oh.
So, and it's just, you think about, they call them deer forests up in Scotland. They're actually not deer forests. They're like deserts. There's very few trees because obviously they were cleared for the grouse because they didn't want the predators. And obviously the deer are pretty prevalent up there, so no trees get a chance to grow they don't get established.
Sure, they just get eaten.
Yeah, so the deer don't get a lot of protection. You do get forest-dwelling deer, and they can put on the weight, but it's a pretty grotty climate up in Scotland. It doesn't get stupid cold, but I guess it's a bit like your New York, that northeast. It's damp, and even if it's not cold, it feels miserable.
Right. That's what I see when I see, and I would love to hunt. I'd love to hunt anywhere, but I'd love to hunt in the UK. And when I see pictures of people doing it in Scotland, a lot of it looks really similar to the country that I saw in Norway.
Yeah, it's the same flora and fauna, same berries.
Yep.
So your Norway experience, you'd recognise the same plants. Yeah. You've got the bog myrtle, the crowberries, the blueberries, all of those same. It's exactly the same. Yeah. I do a lot of hunting in the Arctic. A lot of hunting, quite a bit with my friends up there of Capercaillie, and it's the same flora and fauna. Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about Capercaillie. Like they're an interesting critter.
It's a fantastic bird. A bit like we were talking about the skanky smelling elk. Yeah. The old males aren't so I'm not going to say they're not tasty. They're very distinct flavour. Yeah. And I've eaten most grouse. But I learned from my friend over there that when we get an old male, we just eat it raw. Yeah. And it's brilliant then.
Really?
And I've learned to eat all the skanky meats raw now. I obviously don't do that with anything that carries trichinosis. Yeah. So you're not going to do it with a bear or a pig. But if you've got birds or venison, if you get a rough one, scrape that meat off, a little bit of onion and egg on a piece. Fantastic. But they're big birds. They're up there, turkey size, I guess. And the population, like grouse, it plummets. Right. And then you'll get a grouse explosion. And I think they're the biggest in the grouse family.
And when they're in the breeding season, the males can be pretty aggressive.
Oh, no, yeah, they'll even have a go at you.
Yeah.
And what the Scandinavians do, they use a barking bird dog.
Okay.
Have you ever seen those? I think they're Finnish Spitz or something like that. Huh. Looks like a little fox.
Yeah.
Very thick coat. And a good barking bird dog is worth its weight in gold. And a good barking bird dog is you won't see it. It's always running around in big circles in front of you as you're tracking through the woods. And then when it finds the capercaillie, it starts to bark at them. They go up in the trees and they're not bothered by the dog.
Sure.
But they're bothered by you. So then it's really like deer stalking with a rifle for a bird, because the Swedes shoot them out the trees with a rifle. Use a 6.5 by 55 solid bullet, and you've just got it's hugely exciting. And those birds, they've got fantastic eyesight, so you give them a little chance and they're gone.
Sure.
Yeah. But really, completely different. The whole thing about hunting for me is not so much about pulling the trigger, it's sharing those different experiences of how people do it around the world.
You had an interesting hunt in Greenland this year.
Oh, it's fantastic.
And fishing trip.
Oh,
it was an adventure.
Yeah. It was. I'd say it was more. I'd been to Greenland before, but only in the winter to climb. And I was on the east side with a couple of interesting guys, but that's probably for another podcast. But
are there rocks to climb there, or was it ice?
No, mountains.
Okay.
So a little bit of ice climbing, but it wasn't challenging climbs. But we got 7 new first ascents.
Yeah.
So I got a Mount Jenner and a couple of kids named. I got Mount Maxton as well. I soloed that.
That's neat.
But so if you want to go and climb an unclimbed mountain, Greenland's got plenty of them. Wow. You know, so it was a box ticking thing for us, and it was quite funny because we were left on that east coast. We were taken about 200 kilometres inland. That's probably about 150 miles in American. Well, we do. Yeah, we do miles as well. And we were dropped off by the Inuit.
Okay.
So we were sort of skidooed in, and they fuel dumps and blah, blah, blah. It was really well sorted out. And we were left with a rifle because there's obviously more polar bear on the east coast than the west coast. But you're not going to take a rifle when you're climbing. And it's literally, there's 3 of us climbing. We normally spread out by about half a mile each, most of the time anyway. And a couple of times I thought, yeah, if a polar bear did come out now, it would be hungry after hibernation probably.
Sure.
With a couple would have been very easy pickings. But so getting back to your question, sorry, I'm great at moving on.
No, I mean, climbing an unclimbed mountain with polar bears around is interesting.
Yeah, no, it was, and it was a great thing to do, and brilliant experience. And the 2 guys I went with are very interesting. One of them was he's a BA British Airways pilot. He was the one that crash landed the 777 in 2008.
Okay.
So interesting guy, a friend I've grown up with and climbed a lot with. And then the other one, Simon Yates, is very famous because they made a film on him, Touching the Void, because he cut his mate off. Yeah. Right. So sharing a tent with those 2 dudes it makes for an interesting chat and conversation. And they're both quite solo sort of people, but I think climbers are anyway. Yeah, both very cerebral, bright people. And we had a brilliant time. Yeah, a brilliant time. And we all got back all right. The ice got very dodgy in the end, and it was all warming up. And I soloed one route at a Sunday, and everybody was just resting. I thought, no, this thing's been looking at me. I've got to go and do that. And I climbed that, and I sort of got halfway up and thought, I should probably call this a day now and bail. But I didn't. You don't, do you? You just carry on. It's like that elk that's gone over the next hill, and you think, I'm not worried about carrying it back. I've got to get this result done, and that's where it can go ugly and go wrong. But I summited it all right, and I got back down, and there wasn't any dramas. But that was when I got back to the tent, and the ice that had built up inside the jacket. You know, I thought if I didn't get back to the tent that night, I'd have been in serious bother. And it's a stupid thing to do because you could fall into a crevasse and nobody's ever going to find you, are they? So. probably I was a little bit more gutsy about things then. And now there's no way I'd do that. Yeah. And then 2 days later, we were walking past and the whole mountainside just let go. And I was on that.
Wow.
2 days later, if I'd been on that, you'd never see me again. And nobody's going to find you 200 kilometres in the middle of Greenland because there isn't anybody living there. So I've stepped away from the climbing a lot now. Magali, my partner, says, I don't give a monkey's what you do, Rob, but you leave the ropes behind now. And I think she's right. And at 57, I'm not fit enough. And I feel the cold a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like climbing is similar. It's similar in a lot of ways to a few different, quote unquote, extreme pursuits, and that there's a really big, compelling urge to do it for those who participate. Like it's not something that you can say no to. If it's in your blood, it's something that you're going to go and do, and you might sacrifice everything in your life to do it.
Yeah.
And there are types of fishing that can be like that. There are types of hunting that can be like that. Rodeo can be like that. And it's hard to explain to people who don't do it why it is that you do. But I'm going to give you a stab at it. So what is it about climbing that called you hard enough that you're willing to risk your life in order to do it?
That's a very good question. And I'm going to put it as simply as I can. It makes you value life tremendously. And I've said this before. I say you come home after a trip like that and you put the kettle on. Yeah, a kettle you don't use, to make your tea or coffee.
Sure.
And it just makes things, you appreciate them again. Right? I think it's a bit like I'm not a drug taker, never have taken drugs. I like a glass of wine, I enjoy a beer. But I think it's just that urge to do those things. And we've all got that knife edge level. It's just where you are on that level. And me, I think I was quite a careful climber. I didn't take unnecessary risks, but you'll have it. It's probably, never been in the military, but I probably imagine it's a little bit like a firefight, or something like that, where you get moments where there's such a challenge in front of you and the emotions are just all on that. And if it wasn't on that, you are going to screw it up, right? And you're going to get it wrong. And there's a huge adrenaline. And then when you come off it the other side, you think, building a business, you get very stressed and you stay stressed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
With climbing and things, it's an instant stress. There's a moment where you're going to shit yourself.
Yep.
If you've climbed seriously, you'll have several moments in your life where you think, I am going to die now. There's a good chance I'm going to die if I don't get this right. And I can think of probably 3 or 4 moments in my life where I thought, I'm really in deep poo here, right? And I've got to get myself out of this. And then it's a mental game, and it's not like sport in the fact that you're competing with somebody else. You're competing with yourself. And I love that. I love that, competing with myself and challenging myself and pushing myself to those limits. And I think that's why I like the outdoor world. And climbing presents that. You've got something to think, I want to get to the top of that. I've never been a big high altitude climber. I mean, we tried something in Nepal. It was 6,000 metres, was probably 18,000 feet thereabouts, and we didn't summit that. All got ugly and let go. But that would be that climbing, that kind of challenge for me is not sexy. I don't get that buzz about over 6,000 metres. You're dying anyway. It's just whether it takes you 20 minutes to die or 2 weeks.
Right.
Maybe if you're born in Nepal, you're going to last a bit longer. But that doesn't get me. But physical climbing. Right, where you can still breathe properly in the air, you've still got some lung capacity and things, is where I was all about. So I loved climbing down in Patagonia and places like that. Great fun, but the whole adventure is what it's about. But yeah, getting back to answer your question.
Yeah, let's go back to Greenland.
Yeah, Greenland. So the climbing of Greenland, or we go back to the hunting in Greenland?
You want to talk about climbing more?
Well, we can talk. I mean, that trip will finish perfectly well. The funny thing was, I spent a bit of time with Inuit, but Canadian Inuit. Mm-hmm. And the Inuit that dropped us off there, I said to the other guys, I said, well, we'd be lucky if we see those guys again. If they're anything like the Canadian Inuit, they just turn up when they want to and blah, blah, blah. These guys, you could set your watch by them. And they said, we'll be back at 10 o'clock on such and such motors, but they'd shot a muskox on the way in. Mm-hmm. And we'd been living off rubbish like cashew nuts and something. And that thing, they got a stew pot going. And, never tasted such good food after a few weeks out like that. You've got that real muskox to tuck into, lots of dehydrated crap, and then some real good stuff.
And that flavor is something that's consistent with coming down off those extreme experiences, because it's not just, metaphorically talking about the flavor of life. Like the actual taste of something when you come back from that is a big thing, and it's different. And I think that part of it for me is when you're doing something like getting on a bareback bronc in a rodeo, or rappelling out of a helicopter to fight a fire in a wilderness. It requires so much focus. There's nothing else in the world other than this little tiny narrow perspective that you have that is completely about yourself and your process that's going to keep you alive or not. And when you come back from that, colors pop, tastes pop, like you feel a different sense of life afterwards. And I think that the experience of the moment is big, but the change in perspective afterwards is big as well.
Well, you're never going to put yourself in that kind of environment in an everyday life, are you? So I came off a climb called Gilles in Patagonia, and it took us 15 hours to do this.
Wow.
And if we'd been any good, we'd have done it in probably 10. We didn't take enough water, right? So you come off a route like that, and all you're thinking about is water. Right. Well, you're never going to naturally make yourself that thirsty, are you?
Right.
Right. So the taste of water after I'm just saying, agreeing with what you said there. The taste of the water, I got to a stream and I thought, oh, this is fantastic. And then some local lads put on some Argentine lamb.
Oh, man.
And we had some red wine. And it was heavenly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Heavenly. Fantastic experience. But we've got all of the conveniences. I mean, you live in a marvellous part of the world here. It's beautiful, but we can still go and get a beer and enjoy it. We're not far away from anything. And I think getting back to the climbing, you're putting yourself in an environment where suddenly the levels have gone right up, right? The dangers are up there. The luxuries have all gone out the door. It's really utilitarian, and it's you against that mountain, and it's you coping with the cold and coping with your mental fear about things as well. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm naturally good with heights. People say, no, I look over an edge and I'll get freaky about it just like anybody else. So it's your self-preservation kicking in. But people ask why you do it. I can't just give you a black and white answer, but it just does make you feel alive.
Yeah. And we're not the first people to act like this. This isn't just a product of the comfortable time that we live in. Because when I'm back here in this wilderness, I've found arrowheads in really, really remote places, which tells me that there were guys hunting up there where it was way freaking harder than it would have been in other places, but they were doing it for a reason. And I'm not here to say what that reason was for them, but I know it wasn't because it was the most efficient or because it was the easiest. And when I'm back there in that country and hunting and I find an arrowhead that, might be 1,000 years old, it might be 6,000 years old. That's very interesting to me.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So talk about Greenland, same thing. We ended up finding this old Norwegian Viking ruin, right? But it wasn't a ruin. It was immaculate. The roof has gone, but the work that these Vikings had put into these buildings was unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, the stone was cut. All the walls were absolutely perfect. There was the thing that really got me was there was still crops growing, and they're not native to Greenland. So those crops have been planted. Now the Greenlanders that we were with said those buildings, the Vikings died out 900 years ago. I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but that's what they're saying.
Sounds about right.
900 years ago, right, they died out, and there's still crops growing. And the fascinating thing for me was sort of 300-400 metres away from this place, let's say yards then, we were catching Arctic char.
Yeah.
Now, they say they don't believe the Arctic char were there when the Vikings were there, because it was warmer. And so the Arctic char hadn't moved in, because they found no fish bones in these ruins. Now, they could have easily netted those Arctic char, because they take a bit of finding, but when you find them, you find 400 or 500 of them all in a pool. So that'd have been very easy to catch. But isn't that fascinating?
It is.
Yeah.
It's incredible. What do you think that experience was like? And I'm sure you have a little bit of that perspective when Vikings first came from Iceland to Greenland and landed on this rock. What do you think was going through their heads?
Well, I think the first ones were probably got there because they were sent away.
Yeah.
Probably they were villains or whatever. And
sure.
the Viking society was very good at managing wrong-uns. So probably the first ones that went over there didn't have a lot of choice.
Yeah, that was Australia.
Yeah, the same, but later on. But basically, in Greenland, yeah, certainly they would have sent murderers and said, leave the island, leave Norway, leave Sweden or whatever. And they just got in their boats and went off and found these places. But, I mean, calling it Greenland, it was probably the first ever clever marketing tool going.
Yeah.
You know, say, oh, come here, it's actually not that bad. Now, it was definitely warmer back then because they had domestic, they had pigs, they had cattle,
okay.
You know, and they all died out as it got colder again. And the only Vikings that actually sort of survived were the ones that mixed with the indigenous people.
Interesting.
Right. The actual ones that remained pure Viking just all died out, as I understand it.
Huh.
And they found the bodies of some of those old Vikings, and they were tiny, and they were living off rodents and things. So they'd lost all their skills.
Wow.
Yeah. But
amazing.
Crazy place. But you're sitting there, right? I was in awe. You know, this 900, well, let's say the building's 1,200 years old, because we don't know how long the Vikings were there for. But looking at this and seeing these crops growing, I mean, that's great. It's surreal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And if it was anywhere where there was any real populace, it would have all been broken, or people would have stolen stones or nicked it all. But it's just, yeah. I'd encourage anybody that wants a real adventure where they're not going to run into people to seriously consider Greenland.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say the hunting's particularly challenging. The challenge is finding the animals.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not huge populations.
So were they just really spread out? You had to cover a bunch of ground or wait for a long time?
You could do one or two things. You could either walk and stalk or wait where you think you're going to see some. And you've got big vistas there. It's a bit like driving through Montana. You set yourself with a big view and think, well, I'm covering a good few miles here. I'm going to pick up some movement, and that's what we tended to do. But you're not going to catch up with the thing, so you hope they're just moving in the right direction, because although they don't look very quick, those caribou move, don't they? Yeah.
Well, they're built for it.
Yeah.
One of the things that amazes me about a caribou or a reindeer is when they're running, it looks like you could set a cup of coffee on their back and that it wouldn't spill.
Yeah.
Like their body doesn't move vertically at all, and they have such a smooth and efficient gait, and they're built for covering distance.
And they taste good.
Yeah.
They really do taste
I've never
good.
got to eat one.
Have you? I'd
No.
encourage you to try that.
Yeah. Well,
we didn't starve on that trip. I mean, that was the other difference between the climbing time, where we saw one Arctic fox in that whole trip. This trip you would do well to starve, because every time you put a fly rod or fishing equipment in, you'd pull something out. And you know, we had ptarmigan, and the caribou and the Arctic char. I mean, we were living like kings.
that's beautiful.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. And the guy that took us, the boat that we were on, is 1963, an old oak boat, icebreaker. So it's sort of similar age to me.
An ice-breaking oak boat.
Oak boat, can you believe that? And he said, just wouldn't build a boat like this now. The hull was stupidly thick and such like. And he was a Greenlander Inuit, and a lovely guy, good fun, good
That's
humour,
amazing.
really great knowledge of the area as well.
Yeah.
So if you find those walking encyclopedias when you go to these places, you get so much more out of the trip, don't you?
Right.
Yeah, it's just you just knew everything.
So you ended up getting a caribou?
I got a caribou. I was with my friend Yucca from Sacco. Everybody got caribou.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and basically, there the caribou goes back a bit like the UK. You can sell the meat.
Yeah. Just giving people Americans listening, you're talking about Sacco or Sacco.
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 The Finns tell me
Finns say
Sacco.
Sacco.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I even know some Sacco collectors that have struggled with what to call the damn things.
Yeah.
So Sacco it is.
I was put right actually on the Greenland trip, because I call Sacco, and
Yeah.
Yucca said it's Sacco.
it'll really get some people's hackles up when folks say Sig Sauer.
Yeah,
that one happens quite a bit, but it's Sig Sauer.
Yeah.
And you were using a Sig cross rifle, right?
I'm using the Sig Cross, and I'm going to say I absolutely love it. For the kind of hunting that I do, that's remote areas, often remote areas, very packable. I love the tool. There's so many boxes it ticks for me.
Right.
In the fact that I can pack it down. I've got a little tiny optic on it, 1-to-8 power, which is all. I'm not a long-range hunter. I actually like hunting, so I like to get as close as I can. And I don't have the confidence to do. I have done some long-range shots, and more through luck than judgment. Most of them have come off well, but it's not. I want dead things dead.
Yep.
So I try to get into sort of under 300 yards, and then I'm happy. And that thing does everything I want it to do. I've got it in 6.5 Creedmoor. There's nothing in Europe that I'm not going to be comfortable having a go with that. It's a good little round.
Man, I'm glad it's worked out for you. It's the rifle that I'm hunting with all the time. I really enjoy it. We're actually, Rob and I are sitting out here at my local gun range right now, and we just shot, everything from 100 to 800 yards, and you shot beautifully with the Sig, and then you were also shooting this little Tread 5.56. And you actually put back-to-back shots at 800 yards with that, with like the cheapest 5.56 ammo that money can buy
It
right
just
now.
goes to show, doesn't it? But all guns are good now, aren't they? They've all just upped their game.
Yeah, and ammunition's gotten so much better. I think that the tooling has gotten better, and people's expectations are higher. There's a lot of good going on right now, and it's a neat thing. The interface between your bipod and the cross rifle is really nice. Those complement each other well, I think, because you can keep this rifle slick and modular and folded down and inside your pack, where an attached bipod is pretty cumbersome if you're sliding a rifle in and out of a pack pocket. So having a little Spartan bipod that you can put in your pocket and forget about is really nice, and it fits this gun well. I think that they complement each other nicely.
In that case, I think it's right, because both of them are sort of modular systems, aren't they? And I think if that's the kind of hunting dynamic or that you want out of hunting, absolutely it fits well. There's different tools for different jobs, and I'm not saying we've conquered the world, far from it, but I just think I like the modularity of our systems, because I'm allowing the operator to choose what he wants to do, rather than limit him to a product that is one type of thing. And we're not, I'd be the first to say we don't get everything right.
Well, and I know you didn't really want to talk about Spartan, but I kind of want to talk about it, because I started is that the Woodsman?
Yeah, that's a little bit of history there.
That's the first one that I bought.
Yeah, and there was one that predated that was so awful that I actually no, I'm being really honest. We made 50 of them and they were not good. And we made more than that. We sold 50, and I said, no, these just aren't right yet.
Yeah.
And at my age, if I was running a business and I was 25 or 30, I'd have a very different driver. But 57, you just want to make good gear.
Yeah.
I can't spend loads of money anymore. I can spend enough and come and play with good people like you, and that's my buzz. So I just want to make really good gear.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't make really good gear, and the first tripods were not good. And I wrote to everybody. This was my faith in the human, or the hunting world. I wrote to 50 people that bought those units. And I said, we're not happy with them. Your choice is you can keep the unit, right? We're going to give you your money back, right? Or give me 3 months and I'll make one and I'll get it right.
Yeah.
Do you know what? We did it. We got the new unit made in 3 months, which was crazy. If my memory serves, 2 people asked for their money back.
Yep.
Everybody else went, do you know what? We're going to wait.
Yep.
How crazy is that? And the positive feedback we got from that little journey, and this was in our embryonic stages, was just marvellous. I mean, people loved us for being so honest. I didn't have anything I just said, I'm not happy with them.
Yeah.
Right. And they weren't fit for purpose. The Sentinel you've got there uses French carbon fibre. It's a very simple system, and it works very effectively in the UK as a shooting support system.
Yep.
But it doesn't really replace a tripod.
Yeah.
It's a shooting system. And that was our challenge, because obviously the type of hunting you do in the Northwest is a lot of you need a tripod.
Right.
And for me, a tripod, I've said this a lot of times before, is a heavy bit of kit that I don't necessarily want to carry with me. So the fact I can now turn it into my trekking poles, use it as a two-stick system, which I use 90% of the time I'm on two legs.
Or to set up a tent.
Oh, yeah, we've got a little tent for it as well. And we screwed the early ones of those up as well, first off. But they're now epic tents. They're not a tent I would use every day.
Yeah.
Right? It's a tent that if I was going on a particular hunt, I'll be using them in Scotland when I go back. But I've also got an all-face tent, which I love as well because it's got a bit more room in it. But if you're a real minimalist and you want your trekking poles, your tripod and your tent all in one package, yeah, that's the Spartan system. The limit with that, though, and I'm being honest, I'm telling you, I'm not trying to hard sell anything here because there is always a downside, is if you're using the tripod as your tent frame, you can't use it as a tripod, can you?
Right.
Right, you can pull it out quickly. I have left a pocket at the top so you can still shoot off it, but it's got its place. But there is a certain thing about modularity that it comes with a price.
There's compromise. Yeah. There's always compromise. But when you're doing backcountry stuff and you're hunting off of your back and what you can carry with you, the best way to save weight is to make sure that there's multiple uses for everything.
And exactly. And that's where I'm coming. So I say, look, we're not fixing the world, but we are fixing some answers that haven't been addressed in the past. And we talk about the trekking poles. You know, I'm so proud of those trekking poles because even if you break one, you can still fix it in the field.
Yeah.
It's the only trekking pole that I know you can do that with.
And that's super helpful. You know, field repair is a big thing. And I talked about that on a podcast with Tom Bonamici earlier this year because a lot of times we break something or rip it or whatever. And it's like, oh, we're hosed. Like it's just done. And it doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't.
Well, from climbing, it's the same thing. If something goes wrong, it can be your life.
Yep.
So I look at things and think, if I can keep them light, make them as robust as I possibly can, make them as simple as I can, then why not? And that's really the birthplace of the Sentinel.
Yep.
Because we weren't tripod manufacturers, you know, but that still has a place. That Sentinel still sells very well, and we'll keep it because it sells well in Europe as a hunting system.
I killed several elk off of it. I've killed coyotes and deer off of it. I actually killed a whole bunch of deer off of it. I think it's a good tool, and it's tall enough. Like where I was using it, it was all standing shots.
Yeah,
and it's tall enough that I was pretty fast in getting it to full length, and then carrying it at full length because the legs are pretty slim, and because the foam around the top is a little bit girthier. It was quiet to carry, and that was really nice as well for more of like an African style walk and stalk type deal where we're definitely going to be shooting standing. Weren't going to have a lot of time to set up. It functioned well, but you've come a long ways since then, and I'm kind of a tripod nerd anymore, and you know I use a bunch of different ones for different things. What I've increasingly started doing is using a tripod for shooting prone, which is something that you couldn't have convinced me a few years ago that I would have ever tried.
Doesn't it work well?
It's better.
Yeah. I mean, we've just been shooting off that little tripod, so the ascent on little legs, and I'm picking up rifles that I'm not familiar, and you were guiding me in, but it's a pretty effective little platform.
It is. Yeah. I mean, it's so much more stable. I grew up with milk cows. We had milk cows that were for any calves that were twins, or the mother died, or the mother wouldn't take the calf or whatever. But to start the season, you would have to milk these milk cows because they produce way more than one calf can consume. You know, like these Jerseys were producing 80 pounds of milk a day.
Yeah.
And
good butter, they mate.
It's a wonderful product, but you end up with like so much freaking dairy that you're like, please, just somebody take this. But every milk stool that has ever been made has 3 legs.
Yeah.
They don't have 2, they don't have 4. They have 3 because a tripod can set up on any type of terrain and become stable. If it has 2 legs and it isn't gyroscopically or biologically stabilized, it can fall over. So it's a significant upgrade, and if you can do it in a tight system like this little dude, man, I'm pretty excited about that piece of kit. That's going to be fun.
Well, I've been engaged with a lot of SF units over this, because they've discovered us, and we're not big enough to sort of feed the regular army with gear, it would just kill us. But we sell loads of them to the SF because they got into the habit of shooting off them.
Yeah.
And they can put thermal images on them, they can put cameras on them, but they're loving that little bit of kit. So, you know, a lot of our UK SF have got these little units now. We've been working with the French, Poles, and some lads on this side of the pond have been buying this stuff as well.
Yeah.
So pretty excited on where that takes us, frankly.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Where are some other places, other countries that you've hunted that you've enjoyed?
I was really lucky at the beginning of this year to go to Tajikistan. So we were there on the Afghan border.
Yep.
And that was amazing. I have hunted in Kyrgyzstan before, and that's horseback, and that was great as well. But there was something quite magical about Tajik. I'd love to go back.
I want to hear about both Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. I was in and out of Afghanistan through Kyrgyzstan, and Kyrgyzstan has the highest average elevation of any country in the world.
Amazing place.
Amazing place.
Yeah.
Amazing people. And, I mean, you start getting into some of these places that have ibex and Merrill stag in the same valley. You've got my full and undivided attention.
Well, we had an epic trip, and where they take those little ponies, you know, if you're not really comfortable on a horse, I mean, I'll get from A to B on a horse. I'm not going to, but some of the things you thought, I do not want to fall off now. I better still, me and the horse, I don't want to go.
Yeah.
If your feet are out the stirrups and you think, God, this is going, I'm hoping I'm going there. Crazy places.
As a kid, I was guiding back here in this wilderness behind us with horses. And there's a lot of places that are really steep, really narrow. There's nowhere to go on the steep side, and there's way too far to go on the other side of the trail. And people would freak out, and there's a lot of people that hadn't been on horses. And I'd just say, look, that horse doesn't want to fall down any more than you do, okay?
Well, for anybody that can't see what James is showing me at the moment, I think I'd want wings. Yeah. That's pretty freaky.
I wanted wings sometimes too.
Yeah. But Kyrgyzstan, very different flavours.
Yeah.
So Kyrgyzstan was all horseback, good little ponies. I was really lucky. The people are lovely. My words of wisdom on this, and I'm only speaking from my experience, and there'll be 1,000 people that have different ones. I didn't find them good hunters. So I found them excellent spotters.
Oh.
Right? So I found the locals really good at spotting the animals, but stalking into them wasn't happy with.
And what were you hunting there?
We were hunting ibex.
You were.
And basically, what we in the end did, I ended up leaving them behind because we invested a day. Right, we literally spotted some ibex at the top of the mountain, and the poor guys have got nothing. I mean, these little rubber wellies, and it's tough. I left all my gear there.
Wellie is a boot.
Rubber wellies. A gum boot, you call them, wouldn't you?
Yeah, sure.
But, I mean, not the right environment for where we were climbing mountains, and we had some proper climbing to do to get up there. But when we got up to where the ibex were, I just walked into them. I thought, he must know something I don't. What's going on here? And I realised, no, he doesn't know much. I think they're used to guy pushing the ibex down the valley and waiting at the bottom and ambushing them.
Sure.
So it's not their fault. It's what they've been used to doing, and they probably look at us and think, well, why the hell are we doing all this hard work? We could just push them down and go them in. But wonderful people, great spotters. But when I learned the tactics there, I really enjoyed the hunt, and I was very lucky. I didn't use my rifle. I used some other guy's rifle that I was with, and we had some range finders. And I shot my ibex at 698 yards.
Whew.
And it was windy. And literally, the only reason I hit that was because somebody said it's 45 clicks, Rob. They calculated it for me, and I said, I'm not comfortable with this wind. I mean, and somebody said, well, aim half an ibex in front, and it just dropped like a sack of spuds. So that was an absolute team effort that I was just doing what I was told to do. And had I been left to do it on my own, I wouldn't have. I don't think I'd have had the courage to take the shot, actually.
Sure.
Yeah. But you learn, don't you?
Yep.
So Kyrgyzstan was great. I loved the mountain range. Tian Shan mountain range is just epic. Scenery is, Simon Yates climbed a lot up there. He climbed with some Russians and such like. I'd love to go back and climb it. I'm just too old for that now, but beautiful place, great food. The people are so devoted. They just want you to have a good time. They get so passionate, excited about it as well. I thought that was absolutely great.
Did you feel like Tajikistan was safe?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question. I worry about Tajikistan now because, and I got a little bit angry about it actually because COVID was really in full flux in the UK at the time, and we're doing all these. I don't want to upset any of your listeners, but my view is COVID kills people, yes, but so does proper flu.
Yeah.
And people say I've had the flu and go, no, you haven't had the flu. My dad had the flu when I was 11 years old and I thought he was going to die. And he said if there was 50 quid, let's say $100 on he said I wouldn't have gone to pick it up outside. He just said, I didn't give a toss whether I lived or died. He felt so rough. Proper flu kills people, as does COVID, as does viruses and such like. I won't go down that. But basically, I came out of Heathrow and everybody on Turkish Airlines, all the staff were wearing full body suits, like these painter and decorate masks, everything. And I thought, well, anyway, get on the flight. We go to Istanbul, jump on the next flight that takes us to Tajik, same airline, and they've got nothing on.
Yeah.
I thought, so are we just doing this for the UK? Is it? Yeah,
sure.
Crazy. But anyway, is it safe? So we drove past a lot of it. We basically follow the river system, and on obviously the south side's Afghan, and we're on Tajik. There were a lot of little sniper units on our side. There was quite a lot of firefights between Tajik and Afghan apparently.
Yep.
And we went past one village, and they'd wiped out 100 people. So if you worked for if you were a nurse or doctor or police or anything, they'd come in and just shot them all. Didn't even get to our news. And I thought, well, here we go. We're talking about COVID all the time, and they've wiped this village out. Right?
So who had been doing the killing?
The Taliban, I believe. Yeah. And I think now they're worried about their borders. There's no doubt. I mean, that's the impression I get. And obviously, now it's going to be a big issue, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've just left them with a load of gear, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, really, we've just armed them. Yeah.
And even beyond the arms, like we just gave them a tremendous lesson in how to fight guerrilla warfare.
Oh,
how to become insurgents, how to survive all the technology that the world can bring to bear against them. We've really hardened those people and then armed them and gave them generations worth of reasons to continue hating us.
And think about, say you're a 20-year-old female in that country. You've grown up not knowing. You've grown up in a relatively safe environment where you can go to school and do all these things. And now it's just all gone.
Yeah.
It's awful. Yeah. It's awful. I really feel for the people because there's a lot. And I actually posted something on my Instagram because I get so fed up with people and being politically correct all the time about cross-gender toilets and things like that. And I said, sorry, we're going off on one here, but I'm going to finish this off. And I post a picture of these Afghans giving their kids away to American troops. And I said, now those people, they have issues. They don't even know what their future is, let alone whether they've got one. And they're giving their most precious thing away to somebody they don't know in the hope that they're going to have a better life. And you're talking to me about we should have cross-gender toilets. Sorry.
Yeah.
Stop it.
It's different priorities based on, how comfortable your life is, I think, is a lot of it. But,
well, I'm going to rudely interrupt. Yeah. That's why everybody needs to go and climb a mountain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Put yourself through some stress.
Yeah. Go and stress yourself out.
Get uncomfortable on purpose.
Yeah. And then come back and have a conversation and then say, well, actually, that's quite lightweight, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go and talk about some heavyweight things.
Yeah. Little Lars Skavlan, who isn't all that little, he's actually taller than I am. Lars was the Bering Sea crab fisherman that was on the show a while back. He's trying to be a Navy SEAL. He wants to go to BUDS, and he has a couple months to hit the physical standards to do so. But he's going in the Navy no matter what, whether he's going to BUDS or whether he's going to, end up on something else. He's going, and I want to offer him everything that I can to ensure his success. And what we did the other day, the day after Thanksgiving, because I saw him just plowing through some desserts, and I was like, oh man,
better stop that.
You're not taking this seriously.
Yeah.
was like, all right, here's what we're going to do. So we go up to the local lake, and it's 34 degrees. I was like, we're getting neck deep for 5 minutes, and we're going to practice breathing. Ooh. And that's what we did. And, he was surprised that I got in with him, but I was like, look, this is how military leadership works.
Yeah.
If anything, it's got to be worse for the leader than it is for everybody else. And, as soon as he got in, he was breathing really panicky, as is a normal reaction in water that's that cold. But we worked on it, and when he was ready to get out, he was starting to have some epiphanies about what he needed to do for his workout program, how he needed to improve, what he'd been feeling while he was working out, and things like that. And there's a clarity that comes from conquering stress that cannot come from any other stimulus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really important. But, like some of the stuff that you're saying, I don't necessarily agree with all that. And I don't necessarily agree with everything that people say on my show, but I'm not going to stop them.
No.
Like, that's yours to talk about.
Yeah. We should all be able to have a discussion. And this is what I say to my kids, because I fear, certainly in the UK, the kids are almost getting to a stage now where they're worried about what they say because people might be indifferent to it and get upset. And I said, no, people have died for this, right? We should all be able to have a constructive argument. We can get on. I've got great buddies that have got completely different views to me. Doesn't mean to say I don't respect them or like them, but we can have different views and we can get along and like each other. We might be indifferent to each other, but we should still be able to be free to say what we want to say.
Yep. And be heard. And if you disagree with something, that's totally okay.
Yeah, but talk about it.
Yeah,
Please
sure.
don't go quiet about it. I say, I have this little policy with my kids to say, if somebody's done something well, congratulate them. If it's indifferent, don't do anything. If it's bad, write and let them know. Tell them, right? I spend my life writing to the British Broadcasting Corporation because it's a publicly funded entity.
Yeah.
Right? Publicly funded.
Which is such a foreign idea to us here.
It's not a limited company. They are there to provide impartial knowledge and impartial journalism. What do? They employ people, right, that are openly, like Chris Packham. The guy openly admits he hates hunting and everything to do with hunting and all of those things. And I'm thinking, no, Chris Packham, go and work for a private company.
Yeah.
Why am I paying £157 licence fee to listen to you? You're entitled to your views, but it shouldn't be on a public corporation that is sponsoring that.
Yeah.
Really angry about that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a frustration that we're very fortunate to not have to deal with because, our media is privatized. Even then, like, what's truly impartial? I think that's a difficult thing to achieve.
I think the BBC, if you went back 30 years, was doing an epic job.
Yeah.
My dad was editor of Radio Times. It was the biggest publication next to the Sun newspaper in Europe, and he was extremely proud to be doing that. And I think then they really were doing a good job, but it's filtered in now, and we have things like Amazon and such like that now more powerful than countries.
Yeah.
With a great control on social media, so
right.
It's a little bit concerning where these can end up. I mean, you guys have got a lot of things right here. You've got some things wrong. We've all got them.
Of course.
I come to the States and I think, I really do love a lot about America.
Yeah.
And that's from a guy that comes from an overpopulated part of the planet, and seeing things when they can go wrong. And yes, you've got to work hard, I think, in the States if you want to make some money. But if you're prepared to put the effort in and drive forward, you can do great things here.
Yeah.
And you get patted on the back for it. That's the other thing. People like success in the States. We've had it with Spartan where people have come up to us and said, guys, you're killing it, man. It's great. It's totally. We're a tiny little company. And people love you making an effort to do things. I didn't feel that in the UK. I do now, but we've almost had to go through that process where people almost want to see you die first. And then when you actually do manage to keep your heads above water, and crikey, it's been a few times when we very nearly didn't keep our heads above water. It's been a challenge. It's almost like there's a certain perception, well, they'd be all right if they die. But now I feel that we do get some love in the UK, but it's taken a long time.
Well, you'll just have to make sure and set that example for those other brands that are out there, and show them that support, and be their champion and encourager and mentor. And I think that's how change actually occurs. And it's slow, but it comes from someone setting the example.
Well, I try very hard. I don't say I get it all right, but I try very hard. There's little knife manufacturers I know and other companies that I believe in that make really good gear. I'm not making any money, but at least I can sit there and say, I really like this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think people trust you more.
Yeah.
If you're doing that, you're not being paid to do it, and say, no, there's a company called Red Kettle in Denmark who make great jackets and clothes. It's expensive stuff, but he makes a great job, and he uses Ventile. I'm a big fan of Ventile for certain conditions. I like the FHF boys. I like all of these little companies. There's a lot of similarities between us and those kind of companies, and I think you sort of find some common ground and such like. And it works well. I just like passionate people that are making things. And acknowledge your mistakes. Yep. And the other thing that we do, and I think we do rather well at Spartan, and a lot of other smaller companies do as well, is we listen to the feedback. You came up with the idea. You know, you said, why aren't you using Torx? And I went to the team and I said, yeah, he's right. You know, well, at the moment we're doing metric Allen kit. Well, it's no good over here. And it's a stupid, well, I shouldn't say that. You came up with it, we didn't. But why didn't we think of that? Yeah. And we didn't. You did.
Well, you guys are good at taking feedback, and you're innovating at a rate that it is just amazing, you know, sort of looking at these generations of pieces of equipment that are out here. It's incredible. It's incredible how far you've come, and you've already got your headlights running a long ways in front of you, and it's an exciting future. I'm excited about the stuff I saw here, and I don't know. I think especially this little tripod, like that's got my eyes lit up for sure.
I'm loving the tool. It's and there's things like the little Javelin bipod. I can't. It's sort of where it is now. There's not a lot I can do with that or any. So it works. It's great. It's a great little hunting bipod.
Yeah.
And that's what we pushed it to be. And it's with the new tack legs and all the other bits and pieces. I look at that and think, yeah, I'm comfortable with that. This is an exciting little journey, don't you think?
Yeah.
Because there's so much we can do with them.
Yeah. Yeah. A small, prone, intended tripod, like that's cool. That fits my shooting style a lot. I'm either going to be shooting off of a full-size tripod standing, or I'm going to be shooting off of something really low to the ground, and that's the greatest stability that I could hope for, and I think that's really cool.
The other thing that I'd like you to get to try sometime is if you put 3 long legs on that, put the ankle joints on the back. I'm not saying you'd use it as a hunting environment, but I was speaking to a guy that shot 3 elk, or his wife had shot one, his mate shot one, he'd shot one, and he was using it as a pent system. So he'd got our ankle joints on the bottom and then a cradle at the back. So he's got a standing mobile shooting bench, really.
Yeah.
Would I use it for hunting? No, I wouldn't. It's not my bag, but I can see an application for it.
Yeah. Yeah, you can take these things and make them into whatever you really need, and that's cool. It's fun. It's exciting. Well, sir, I am very grateful that you made the long journey out here to be able to do this, and I know you've got miles to go ahead of you still today, and wish you safe travels back home, and look forward to running into you hopefully at some of the shows this year. I don't completely have my schedule lined out, but I have a feeling we're going to run into each other again this winter.
Well, I hope so, James. Absolutely loved it. Thank you so much for inviting me on, and it's been a great pleasure.
Cheers. Thank you. October, November, December, they're just the best months out of the year, right? Whether it's for work or hunting or fishing, the holidays, spending time with your family, it's awesome, right? And we've got some nice cold mornings now, and you get to go out and have a warm drink in the duck blind or out on the hillside where you're glassing for mule deer or elk, or sitting in a tree stand waiting for a whitetail to come past. Or you're working on the job site and you get to take a break and have some nice warm coffee waiting for you. It's pretty nice. Having a cold drink at the end of the day, that makes everything a little bit better too. My favorite Stanley item right now is the 14-ounce titanium travel mug. Super lightweight because it's made out of titanium, so I'm willing to take it with me when I'm hunting, throw it in my pack. Fits in every cup holder out there, and it just seems to be the right amount of coffee. I like it. It's a really cool item, and it fits a niche that I didn't have filled in like any of my other drinkware categories, I guess. If you're looking for a Christmas present for somebody or just a gift that you want to help them out with, I recommend this because it's pretty cool and it's something that they don't have already. The way most discount codes work, completely honest, is if you use it, then whoever gave you that code gets a kickback. Now, I'm not a salesman, and I want nothing to do with that. So I'm going to pass along to you a discount code that Stanley gave me because they're great supporters of this podcast and they're great supporters of this audience, which I love. So if you use the discount code 6ranch, the number 6, the word ranch, you'll get 25% off anything you order from stanley1913.com. I get nothing back from that. I don't want anything. I just want to pass along some savings to you and save you a little bit of money and get you connected with this great company that makes really great products. And as we move through fall and get into winter and the holidays, just hope everybody's doing well and having a good time and that you get to get out there and connect with nature and connect with your friends and family and have a nice warm drink while you're doing it. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share the show with a friend. You can also rate the podcast and leave a review. Your support allows me to keep doing what I love, which is meeting incredible folks and sharing their stories with you. For more content and photos, follow the show on Instagram at 6ranch Podcast or me at 6ranch Outfitters. This episode was produced by Emily Brannigan, with original music written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the 6ranch Podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Christofferson. Tune in every Monday for a brand new episode of the 6ranch Podcast. I'll catch you next week.